In the year 1872, on the fog-drenched coast of Maine, a community vanished into silence. Their children, innocent, fragile, and terrified, were taken by their own families, led into the marshlands and never seen again. To outsiders, it was called devotion. To survivors, it was betrayal. And hidden beneath the eerie chants and secret rituals was a truth much darker. The children chosen were not all equal. In Blackwater Hollow, difference meant doom, and those most despised by society were offered first. What kind of faith demands a sacrifice of children? And why were some children valued less than others? Blackwater Hollow was a place that few maps bothered to mark. Tucked in the shadow of Maine's cold forest, it was a town built on salt, superstition, and silence. The people there were poor but proud, bound together by faith in the harshness of their land. And at the center of their lives was a cult that promised deliverance, promised safety from hunger, storms, and the diseases that swept through New England's coastal villages. Among the families who lived there was the Turner family. James Turner was a fisherman, hardened by the sea. His wife, Ruth, kept their household together with quiet strength. And their children, Mary, Samuel, and little Jacob, with a joy that kept them enduring through cold winters. But not all children in Blackwater Hollow were treated equally. Black families, Irish immigrants, and indigenous people pushing the fringes of Maine's coast were drawn into the community by desperation, but they were never embraced as equals. Their children played beside others, yet were reminded constantly that they were different names, different skin, different value. It was within this atmosphere of faith and division that the cult's leaders began to speak of a ritual, a cleansing, a way to ensure the Marsh would protect them, not consume them. They whispered that the Marsh demanded innocence. And innocence, they said, was found in children. At first, it sounded like folklore, a frightening story told to keep little ones from wandering into the swamps. But soon, the whispers became orders. And when the cult spoke, families obeyed, even when obedience meant unthinkable sacrifice. The ritual began quietly. One child, a boy from a family of poor Irish immigrants, disappeared. His parents claimed he was taken by fever, but everyone in the hollow knew the truth. He had been carried into the marsh, swallowed by the fog and silence. Weeks later, another child vanished, this time a girl from a black family who lived at the edge of the settlement. Her mother wept at the steps of the meeting house, begging for mercy, but her cries were drowned out by the chanting of the faithful. It became clear the cult's sacrifices were not random. They began with those the town already pushed aside, the children of outsiders, the poor, the ones marked as less than. For the leaders, it was easy to demand the lives of those no one wished to protect. And for the townsfolk, looking away meant safety for their own blood. Mary Turner, just 12 years old, saw everything. She saw the way neighbors turned cold when Samuel played with Jacob, the way her mother looked away when whispers spread. She noticed how the sacrifices never touched the families with influence. The pale-skinned, the wealthy, the one seated in the front of the church. Fear grew inside her home. Ruth clutched Jacob tighter at night, terrified the Marsh would claim him next. James, torn between protecting his family and obeying the cult, grew harsher, his silence cutting deeper than words. When a leader knocked at their door, asking for offerings, Mary felt her heart stop. This time, the ritual would not be satisfied with the children of outsiders. One fog-soaked evening, the cult announced a gathering at the marsh's edge. Families were told to bring their children. Some wept, some prayed, and some obeyed in cold silence. The Turners, too, were called, and as Mary walked beside her brothers, she felt the weight of the swamp pressing in, the reeds whispering, the water swallowing the moonlight. She knew they were walking toward something no child should ever see. The chanting began. Torches lit the darkness, and one by one, children were led to the water. The night erupted with terror. At the edge of the marsh, the cult's leader raised his arms, calling for purity, for sacrifice, for obedience. Parents clutched their children as if holding them one last time. Some resisted, only to be silenced by threats of damnation, or worse, by neighbors eager to prove their loyalty. When the Turners were called forward, Ruth cried out, begging for Jacob to be spared. James stepped forward, his face pale with torment, torn between fatherhood and survival. But before he could act, Mary moved. She stood between her little brother and the cult, her voice trembling but fierce. She accused them, called out the truth everyone knew but would not speak, that the children chosen were always the ones society had already condemned, that race, poverty, and difference marked the innocent as expendable. The crowd faltered. For a moment, the chanting stopped, but the leader's voice roared over hers, declaring Mary corrupted, declaring her a danger to them all. The mob surged. Torches flared. Ruth screamed. James fought back. But in the chaos, Mary was seized. She felt hands dragging her toward the water, cold reeds wrapping around her ankles. She screamed for Jacob to run, for her family to remember her voice, even if her body was lost. The marsh closed in, swallowing the sound, swallowing the light. When dawn broke, the fog still hung heavy over Blackwater Hollow. Families returned home in silence, their children clutched tighter, their eyes hollow. The Turners' home was broken. Ruth wept for her daughter. James wandered the shore in guilt. Jacob, too young to understand, carried the shadow of that night forever. Mary's defiance was not forgotten. Some whispered she had angered the cult, sealing her fate, but others remembered her words. She had named injustice out loud, that those most despised by society were the first to be sacrificed. And though she was gone, her voice echoed in the guilt and shame of those who stayed. Blackwater Hollow eventually vanished from maps, swallowed by time and silence. But the story of its marsh, its cult, and its children lingers like mist. It is a story not only of superstition, but of injustice, how fear and prejudice can strip children of their humanity, making them offerings for society's survival. Mary's tragedy mirrors a broader truth. In every generation, some children are told they are worth less because of their skin, their family, or their difference. Some are cast aside, sacrificed, not to a marsh, but to poverty, violence, or systemic injustice. The question that remains is this: when the world demands sacrifice, whose children are offered first? And will we remain silent, or will we, like Mary, dare to speak, even if our voices tremble?